This lecture talks about cranial nerves. Cranial nerves are found within the cranium. What else is found in the cranium? The brain. So now we will add the two details together. Cranial nerves must be somehow associated with the brain. That's correct. There are a set of nerves that originate in the brain itself. Some other nerves arrive at the brain from elsewhere. Okay, whatever you find associated with the brain is what we refer to as cranial nerves. Now, there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. 12 pairs of cranial nerves given a Roman numeric number as well as names. Sometimes these names refer to the function of that particular cranial nerve or the location of the cranial nerve. Not all, but some give away the details. All right. With this introduction, we will talk about individual cranial nerves. Cranial nerve 1, referred to as olfactory nerve. Well, olfactory nerve, as the name suggests, deal with the sensation of smell or olfaction, which is the function of the nasal cavity. In fact, the roof of the nasal cavity is where you have millions of olfactory cells. They reach the brain carrying sensory signal about smell, and now they gather here in the olfactory bulb. And from this point on, the sensory information travels along olfactory tracts, which reach the olfactory area of the cerebral cortex, where the signals of olfaction are processed. Second cranial nerve is optic nerve. Optic refers to vision, eyeball, and yes, they originate in the eyeball. In fact, the sensory structures, rods and cones, converge to become bipolar neurons, and then the ganglion cells ultimately becoming optic nerve from the right eyeball, left eyeball, reach the brain. And once they reach the brain, here is the optic nerve from the right side or the left side, they cross over. This crossover is what you call as optic chiasm. Once they cross over, they continue as optic tracts. Optic tracts reach the occipital lobe, specifically the visual area of cerebral cortex, where the details of the vision is processed. So those two are sensory cranial nerves we discussed so far. Now let's go to the next few cranial nerves. Cranial nerves 3 and 4, they are situated in the midbrain. In fact, they originate in the midbrain. They are motor cranial nerves. Cranial nerve 3, oculomotor, as the name suggests, does supply the extrinsic eye muscles that control eye movement. In addition to controlling eye movement, this nerve also controls the constriction of the pupil and another function called accommodation. Accommodation is how the lenses change their shapes to be able to see the distant object. All right. Now, trochlear nerve or cranial nerve 4 is yet another motor nerve that originates in the midbrain, supplies another pair of extrinsic muscles and control eye movement. Next, we go to cranial nerves that are associated with the pons. The one that you see here, the largest cranial nerve, is what you call as trigeminal nerve. Trigeminal nerve, cranial nerve 5, is a mixed nerve. Mixed nerve meaning has both sensory and motor functions. Now, the sensory portion of the trigeminal nerve originates within the different parts of the face. That is ophthalmic branch, maxillary branch, mandibular branch. So these three branches that originate in different parts of the face deal with sensory signals, general sensory signals such as touch or pain or temperature. Those signals are brought to the brain from the three branches, and ultimately it's processed in the cerebral cortex, the postcentral gyrus. All right, the motor branch of this nerve deals with chewing, okay, mastication. Now, cranial nerve 6 is called obtusens. Obtusens is yet another motor cranial nerve, meaning it originates in the pons and supplies yet another extrinsic eye muscle that's supposed to be like causing abduction type of movement, and that is why the name obtusens. Okay, so there are 3 cranial nerves that control eye movement. Those are cranial nerve 3, 4, and 6 so far. Okay, now cranial nerve 7 is another mixed cranial nerve, which is also called as facial nerve, and the sensory part of this cranial nerve supplies the tongue and deals with the sensation of taste. It supplies the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. All right, so that's where the taste signals are gathered and brought to the pons and ultimately taken to the postcentral gyrus within the cerebral cortex. The motor function is to regulate facial expression as well as to regulate secretion of tears as well as secretion of saliva. All right, now cranial nerve 8 is vestibulocochlear nerve. It's right behind 7. Cranial nerve 8, vestibulocochlear nerve, is another sensory cranial nerve. Vestibulocochlear nerve means that it originates from the vestibule and the cochlea of the inner ear. In fact, the vestibular branch is formed from both the semicircular canals and the vestibule. Both of these structures deal with equilibrium, and cochlea deals with hearing, and those branches come together as one nerve, and that is vestibulocochlear nerve. Once it reaches the brain, the details of the equilibrium or balance is processed by the cerebellum and other motor structures within the CNS, whereas the sensory signal about sound is processed in the auditory portion of the cerebral cortex, which is situated in the temporal lobe. So now let's talk about cranial nerve 9, which is a mixed cranial nerve. It's also called as a glossopharyngeal nerve. So look at the name. Glossopharyngeal supplies the muscles in the pharynx area. So this is where you talk about the motor function and the sensory function. Sensory function is to deal with the sensation of taste. Sensation of taste from the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. The motor branch of the glossopharyngeal deals with swallowing. All right, the muscles in the pharynx would trigger swallowing reflex. All right, now we talk about, you may also hear about gagging type of function associated with glossopharyngeal nerve. Next, we'll talk about cranial nerve 10, vagus nerve. Its nickname is wandering nerve. Vagus nerve is an important cranial nerve. It's a mixed nerve, has both sensory and motor branches together. Now, vagus nerve is found in many parts within the body, in the thoracic area, as well as in the abdominal area. Okay, so it supplies the heart, for example, found in the airways or in the digestive structures, and so on. That's why the name wandering nerve. Now, let's talk about cranial nerve 3, that is oculomotor, 7 is facial nerve, 9 is glossopharyngeal, and vagus nerve 10. All 4 of these carry sympathetic flow. Among the 4 cranial nerves that are associated with parasympathetic function, vagus nerve is the one that carries the most. About 80% of the parasympathetic flow is via vagus nerve. Okay, an important nerve from that point of view. Now we talk about the last 2 cranial nerves. One is accessory nerve, and then the other one is hypoglossal nerve. Both are motor nerves. Accessory nerve spreads over a wide area, that is the tail end of the medulla to the early part of the spinal cord. So it's often called as the spinal accessory nerve. Okay, so what you're looking at here is a spinal accessory nerve that supplies the skeletal muscles in the pharynx, larynx, and even the shoulder. An example would be trapezius muscle. So shrugging of shoulder, for example, would be associated with this motor nerve, accessory nerve. All right. Now the last cranial nerve that we discuss is hypoglossal nerve. Hypoglossal nerve is the one that is associated with the movement of the tongue. All right, so these are the cranial nerves. Some are motor, some are sensory, some are mixed, and all of that is organized here in this particular slide. Nerves associated with the brain, there are 12 pairs: sensory, olfactory, optic, and vestibulocochlear nerves, motor or oculomotor, trochlear, abducens, spinal accessory, and hypoglossal. Mixed cranial nerves are trigeminal, facial, glossopharyngeal, and vagus. And all the Roman numeric numbers are also shown here. 1 and 2 are found in the cerebral area, 3 and 4 in the midbrain, 5 through 8 are housed in the pons, and 9 through 12 in the medulla oblongata. All right, this is the end of the discussion of the cranial nerves. Thank you.